So I just got back from sitting with someone who is actively dying, and the dynamic in that room felt a lot like the woman that I sat with years ago. When I was sitting bedside with her years ago, she was with family and she was also actively dying. She'd been unresponsive for a couple days at that point, and before she passed, she opened up her eyes, she smiled, and then she said her mother's name. Now, her mother had passed years before, and I thought it was just such a beautiful passing. But what surprised me, especially back then, was that her family had no idea what to expect and was shell-shocked. Now, have you ever sat with someone who was actively dying and felt completely unprepared for what was happening? Maybe you were waiting for their last breath and didn't know how or when it would come. Maybe you were scared about the changes in their breathing, their skin, their energy, wondering if this was all normal. And maybe you felt like no one had prepared you for this part. If that's you, you're not alone. Now, dying is not a single moment. It's a sacred process. And when you understand the physical, emotional, and spiritual stages, it changes everything. And once you stop fearing death, you start honoring it. But here's the thing. The system doesn't want to talk about this. Medical staff are trained to save lives, not guide people through death. Society wants us focused on anti-aging, youth, productivity, anything but the truth that we are all going to die someday. And the silence that we have in not being able to talk about it in our spaces, well, it leaves families feeling scared, confused, and traumatized. And it doesn't have to be that way. So, hello, if you're new here, my name is Death Doula Beth, and I talk about death, dying, and grief on this channel. I want you to know that death is not a failure. It's a final transition and one we all deserve to understand. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what happens 6 months before someone dies, all the way up until the moment that it happens. And I'll also share with you how you can support someone during those final days. All right, so are you ready? Cool. I decided to bring out my handy dandy Betty whiteboard for this one. So backstory, I thought she was going to be smaller because I had ordered her from online. So lesson learned, look at the dimensions before you buy. But I kind of like her. Okay, this is ridiculous. All right. Serious. We're talking about a serious thing here. Anyway, 3 to 6 months before someone dies, you're going to see them get a little bit more sleepy. Maybe not sleeping all the time, but they're going to want to take naps more often. And usual things that they would be able to do before, they're not going to be able to do so much anymore. They're not so jazzed about going out or having people over. When at end of life, they just don't have the energy. They just don't have the spoons. They're a little bit tired and they just want to isolate. There are distinctions between depression versus isolation due to end of life, symptoms. However, use your best judgment because you know your person better than I do because I'm just some random person on the internet. But it is something to look out for, especially at this stage, because, you know, this is a hard thing to go through. So they're not going to be as hungry as they used to be, and they're most likely on hospice. So you're going to have some sort of support. If you're starting to notice these sort of symptoms, the 1, 2, and 3, I would highly suggest to call hospice if you haven't already. The thing about hospice is you don't necessarily have to be up close and ready to die before you call hospice in. It's always a good idea to call hospice earlier rather than later because you can get so much more support. All right, moving on. So one thing before we move on to the next one, get people who want to visit the person in before the next stage, okay? Especially if they want to catch up. So a good way to support your person during the 3 to 6 month phase is to just support them in whatever activities they feel up to doing. This is not the time to go on long trips or bucket list items. This is the time to really do quality time versus quantity. Okay? All right, so let's move on to 1 to 3, 1 to 3 months. So 1 to 3 months, you're going to start noticing that your person is going to need more help with daily tasks, such as showering, going to the bathroom, and even food prep. It's not limited to this list, but those are the most common things that I see people that need help around life with. You're just going to notice them getting more slowed down and just getting more sleepy. Not only that, but their mental decline will be more prominent during this time. You might even experience a little bit of confusion. And this is not atypical. This is all pretty normal. But always consult with your hospice nurse before coming to any conclusions. But typically, a little bit of confusion is normal during this stage. And you're going to notice that they're going to be eating and drinking less and possibly even homebound or even bedbound. Now, again, their energy levels are going to be going down, 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 down. And another thing I like to make a note here is just because our person is not eating or drinking doesn't mean that they're starving to death. It's just a normal part of the dying process. When someone is getting to the end of life, having them be dehydrated is actually a really good thing. Now, you might be concerned that your person is not eating or drinking as much as they were and that we should be pushing fluids. It's quite opposite. The dying person dies better when they're dehydrated. I know it's so counterintuitive, but just trust the process. And the reason for that is because there's fluid that can build up around the organs and make it a lot more uncomfortable for the person. Okay, I know it's alarming, but this is why we're doing this video, so we can be educated on what's happening. Okay, moving on. Before I move on to the next part, just want to share with you some ways that you can support your person in the last 3 to 6 months of their lives. Again, it's more of the same, supporting them in whatever activities they are able to do. Sometimes that's playing card games, sometimes that's telling stories, sometimes it's just sitting with them. But this is the perfect time to be telling stories, to be saying the things that you want to say. When we're in this time period and they're awake and lucid, this is the perfect time to start making those memories. And sometimes we don't know how long this time period is going to last. So it's really important to say the things that you want to say now so that you don't leave something unsaid and get the people who want to visit them there now. Now we're going to go to 1 month. So 1 month before someone passes, they're hardly eating or drinking. Again, the body knows how to die, and a dehydrated body is better at dying than a hydrated one. They are sleeping more or often unconscious. So you're also going to see more physical and mental decline here, which means they're probably not going to be moving much, maybe from their lazy boy or from their bed, but typically they're just not able to move around as much. And this is the month where they see the deathbed visions, which I'm fascinated with. Now, I'll tell you a couple. Now I'll tell you a story of the first time I experienced someone who was experiencing deathbed visions. I had read about it, I had heard about it, I have, watched all kinds of stories about it, but to actually witness someone having these deathbed visions was like seeing a unicorn. So I was sitting there with my client and she was like half in here and half out. And it was during her hospice intake. So I see her looking off into the distance and like just in another world. And I was like, hey, what's going on? You seem like you're somewhere else. And she goes, Beth, you would never believe. I know you're here and I know the hospice nurse is there, but there's a whole nother world here. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And she's like, yeah, there's a sailboat and there's an ocean and I see these people and they're here and they're waving to me. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, who's on the boat? Like, who's waving to you? And she goes, I can't really see them, but I know that I know them. So deathbed visions usually entail seeing people who have passed on before, who are coming to take them home or take them on a trip. Now, this is not to be confused with hallucinations, which happen at end of life, especially if someone has brain tumors or some sort of brain disease. With hallucinations, typically they're not scary, they're just sort of out there. And the best way to support your person during this time is just to ask them questions, get really curious about it. It's not a scary thing unless you make it a scary thing. And sometimes they won't even tell you because they're afraid of what you might think. And the best way to bring this up is, hey, I saw this lady talking about this thing on YouTube, and well, you want to talk about it? And they might open up. Who knows? But I do know that some people feel a little bit more reserved in telling their loved ones that, yeah, I saw grandma or I saw mom or dad, whoever their loved one is on the other side. So have you had someone experience deathbed visions? Let me know. I am always so fascinated with this phenomenon. So this is the stage where I see most loved ones really struggle with the process of dying, and it's the actively dying stage. I don't mean to laugh, but this thing is just so big. All right, actively dying. Let's go over this. Most likely they're unresponsive, so they're not going to wake up even if you try to rouse them. They can hear. The hearing is the last thing to go, so they are still able to hear. You're also going to see physical changes, such as their temperature is going to rise up. Most of the time, I'll see a fever and then it'll break, and then they'll go back to normal temperature and then even lower than normal. This is normal. The body is dysregulated because, the systems are misfiring, but the body knows how to die. And so again, this is all very, very normal. Their breathing is going to change. So I want to talk about the breathing for a moment because the breathing is where I see most concern. So the word that we're using for breathing is agonal breathing. And so you'll notice they'll take an inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, or sometimes they'll inhale. And there's a lot of pauses, and sometimes it could be really noisy. And so, again, that's all normal. What we're looking for is an open jaw and eyes, easy eyes is what I say. When I see easy eyes, like there's no furrowed brow, there's no like angst. When we're looking at someone who is dying and who's not responsive, it's sort of like looking at a baby. When we look at a baby and we know that they're uncomfortable, they're crying, or you could just see it on their face. And same thing as with someone who's dying. They're going to show it on their face. So easy eyes, open jaw. That's how we know they're comfortable. So sometimes their breath will start to sound different. So sometimes you'll notice that they're snoring or they'll start groaning because the vocal cords are relaxed. And as they're exhaling, you'll hear something like that. If it's a rhythmic sound, you can bet yourself that that is a normal breath. But if it sounds more tense or it's not rhythmic, then that's something to be concerned about. But when it's with an exhale, that's when we know it's just normal breath going over the vocal cords, and we know that they're relaxed and at peace. And really putting in that they are laboring out of this life. There are stages to this, and this is the final stage before they transition out, and it is a labor. It is a lot of work to get into this world, and it's a lot of work to leave this world. I also want to leave you with the rally. The rally is when someone who is unconscious, you think they're going to die, and all of a sudden they're up and they're eating food and they're talking and sometimes they're even walking around. This is called the rally. And when we know that this is the rally, we can use that time to share memories and make more memories or use that opportunity to just reconnect with our person. The unfortunate part is some families will get their hopes up that they're getting better. Now, usually the rally will happen over a day, maybe a few hours. It all depends on the person, but they'll have their rally and then they'll go back to an unresponsive state and then they'll soon die after that. So just keep in mind that the rally does happen in a lot of the cases. And so how you can help support your person in the actively dying stage is just to keep them comfortable. Let them know that you're there. Keep talking to them. Because hearing is the last thing to go, they can still hear you. So being mindful of people and noises in the area that you're in, making sure that the person has their music that they want to have played or stories that they want to hear from family. You can also use this time to call people to talk to the person before they go. So another way that you can support them is if they're spiking a temperature, to just put a cool cloth on their forehead. If they're clammy, you can take the blankets off, or if they're cold, you can put heating pads on. So if you're pre-planning what you want your death to look like, it's really important to say, hey, if my feet are cold, I don't like cold feet, so please put a heating pad on my feet. And then also you want to make sure that their mouth is wet. There's swizzle sticks, you dip them in water, and then you rub it on their mouth and on their teeth to clean their teeth and to clean their mouth, just to make sure that it stays wet because it's uncomfortable to have cracked lips. Now, this isn't to rehydrate them. This is more so just to keep things wet. But another thing to keep in mind is if there's too much water or moisture or saliva in their mouth and in the back of their throat, you will hear the death rattle which is the gurgling sound that people have at end of life, and that could be really distressing for some people. So just to keep in mind. And also, if you put a swizzle stick in someone's mouth, a reflex is for them to clamp down. So don't be surprised if that happens. So another thing that I didn't mention was their look of their skin. Their skin is going to start to change because they're physically changing. So this means that their extremities, like their feet and their hands, you might see some modeling. It'll look like a maze of some sort. It's like a patterning on their skin. So that's all completely normal, and there's nothing that you need to do in order to make that any better. What you can do is put lotion on their skin. You can hold their hand. You can tell them things, rub their head. That sort of thing is really comforting, not only for you, but for the person on the bed. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. I love hearing from you. And if this is something that interests you and you'd like to start pre-planning, I put together a 10-question checklist called the Conscious Death Checklist. It's a gift for you, and the link is in the description below. That's all for this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.